We know this Red Sox rotation could be good, but can it be the best? What is going on, everybody? Welcome back to Red Seat Radio. My name is Corbin, and thank you very much for clicking on this video. Before we get into the content today, I did want to remind you guys that tonight, right here on this YouTube channel, we are going to be live at 7 p.m. Eastern Time, recapping everything that's been going on with the Red Sox in spring training. Again, that is going to be tonight, right here on this channel, 7 p.m. Eastern Time. Anyways, today we're taking a look at the Red Sox starting rotation. We're going to take a look at what they are projected to do and how they could potentially be the best rotation in Major League Baseball. What would it take for them to get there? Starting with where I got this crazy idea. It started actually last season by the end of the season, because despite the names that were in this rotation and the lack of, let's say, star power in this rotation, the Red Sox had one of the better rotations in Major League Baseball. They were 7th in Major League Baseball according to ERA, and they were 3rd in WHIP in Major League Baseball. They added Crochet, Buehler, a healthy Giolito, and Patrick Sandoval to this rotation. Just rationally looking at this, right? The Red Sox should be better on paper coming into next year than they were last year. And if they were 7th best last year in terms of ERA, well then, hypothetically, wouldn't that put them in the conversation of being one of the best rotations in Major League Baseball? I think so. And actually, my hypothesis was backed up a little bit when Fangraphs put out their projections for the 2025 season, because in that, they also had the Red Sox as one of the best rotations in baseball for 2025. They have them as the 4th best rotation in the sport according to F4 at 19 even, only 3.1 WAR away from that top spot and the top spot for the AL. Now, it's going to be pretty incredibly difficult to beat the teams above them. The Dodgers have potentially 5 aces in their rotation. I mean, that rotation is just... it's absolutely ridiculous. The Phillies have a couple of dogs. They traded for Jesus Luzardo last year as well. And the Braves, if they stay healthy, they have at least 2 Cy Young candidates on top of that, right? And that's a formidable rotation as well. So now the question becomes, how does the Red Sox, who are projected to be the 4th best rotation in the sport, get to a point where they are the best rotation in the sport? And I got to tell you, I don't think it's incredibly unrealistic. The answer to this question starts with the War Pig, right? It starts with Garrett Crochet. In all reality, Crochet's ceiling is what is going to determine the Red Sox ceiling here. Right now, Crochet is projected to be the 4th best starter in all of Major League Baseball on Fangraphs. He is 2nd in AL Cy Young projections. This is your dude. It's why you traded who you traded for him. I don't think it's really all that far-fetched to see him reach that status this season. He showed all the capabilities of doing so last year. He's healthier. He's happier than he was last season, right? This is a guy that absolutely could be everything you need him to be, and that's where this all starts. If Garrett Crochet is the guy that you wanted him to be when you traded for him, the Red Sox rotation has a legitimate shot at this. If you're trying to get to the best rotation in baseball, Garrett Crochet has to be at the front of that. From here, things get kind of interesting, because how do the Red Sox propel themselves up a little bit? Well, I think the next most important part of this rotation is going to be Tanner Houck. He's kind of a little bit forgotten, I think, by Red Sox fans and just national media in general, for being honest, right? With the new additions to the Red Sox, that's where all the focus has been. But Tanner Houck was one of the best pitchers in the AL last year, and his projections have him in that range as well. Fangraphs has him as a top 30 pitcher in Major League Baseball next season. Now, their projected ERA is at a 3.82 throughout the year. I think Houck can be better than that. Maybe not to the tune of a 3.12 ERA like he had last season. Maybe there is some regression coming for Tanner Houck, but I still think even with regression, he can be a very productive pitcher. Baseball Reference is projecting Tanner Houck to have an ERA in the 3.68 range, which I think is actually much more realistic. Now, despite the fact that that is only 0.14 wins better than what Fangraphs is projecting, it would really increase his overall WAR, especially if he throws around the same amount of innings he threw last season, which again is something that is realistic, right? Tanner Houck proved he can do that last last year, even if he's not as dominant as he was last year on the mound, and he is closer towards that 4 ERA number, a 3.68 ERA is still an absolutely fantastic number 2 pitcher, especially, again, if he gets to that innings. If he doesn't get to that innings, we're not going to be able to get there, but the innings are going to be really important for Tanner Houck. This brings the Red Sox projected overall WAR to 19.5. Now we're really in the conversation of, okay, a couple of things go better and a couple of different starts for a couple of different guys. We're talking about a top 3 rotation in the sport right now. The next most crucial part of this Red Sox rotation for me is Walker Buehler. Now this one's extremely interesting because he's kind of the exact definition of a wild card, right? We've seen what prime Walker Buehler can do on the mound, and it's absolutely disgusting. It is a legitimate Cy Young candidate caliber type pitcher. We've also seen that his floor is pretty rocky. I think as Red Sox fans, it's a bit unrealistic to expect Walker Buehler at this point in his career to get back to what prime Walker Buehler looked like, but I also don't think it's unrealistic to say that he's going to be better than he was last year. He wasn't just trying to stay healthy, he was trying to remember how to be a major league pitcher again. We saw sort of him regain that confidence and that ability to be an actual pitcher in the playoffs last year. I do think that carries over into 2024 as well. Now the question is, what does that actually look like? Well, Fangraphs is projecting him to have a 3.92 ERA over 121 innings. If the Red Sox get a sub 4 ERA from Buehler, they're going to be in a really good place. I think the separator here and how the Red Sox can achieve the status of the best rotation in Major League Baseball is once again going to be those innings, right? If you get more than 121 innings from Walker Buehler, and let's say it's more in the 150 innings-ish range here, you're going to be in a much better spot. He's on a 1-year deal. He's motivated to try and prove to himself and prove to the league that he is worth a multi-year deal. This is a big year for him. He knows it. I think he's going to rise to the occasion. Being able to be a consistent pitcher over 150 innings is really going to be a difference maker between the Red Sox having a top 5 rotation and the Red Sox having a top 3, 2, or 1 rotation. Then we move on to Brayan Bello, and like everyone else that we're talking about right now, he's extremely interesting because his season's going to come down to 2 separate things. One, health, right? He's not fully healthy. Right now, it looks like he's leaning more towards I'm getting healthy and away from I can't get healthy, but we don't know if he's going to start the year on the IL. We don't know if he's going to start the year with the team. That's going to be a big difference maker, but let's talk about the other factor in this as well. Let's say he is healthy. Let's make that assumption. The other factor here is he just simply needs to be better statistically. Last year was a rough year for him. He finished with a 4.49 ERA with 2 F4, but we did also see that the Bryan Bello that we have been expecting is absolutely still in there. And my proof of this is the last 10 starts Bryan Bello made. In those last 10 starts, which by the way, isn't exactly a small sample size, right? That's essentially the last 2 months of the season. He had a 3.25 ERA with a 3.46 FIP. That is the electric starter we are expecting and want Bryan Bello to be, and I 100% believe that guy is still in there. Now, again, we go back to the injury, and even if he does start the year healthy with the Red Sox, is that injury going to prevent him from getting to a point like that? I don't know, right? But statistically, Bryan Bello needs to be better than he was last year if the Red Sox want a legitimate chance going for that #1 title. It doesn't need to be crazy better, though, right? We don't need to have Bryan Bello sit in that 3.25 range for the Red Sox to be in this conversation. Right now, he just kind of needs to be a really solid #3 or #4 pitcher. That's it, right? He doesn't need to be the face of the franchise when it comes to pitching. He doesn't need to be a #2 or a #1. He just needs to get through a season healthy and give the Red Sox some quality starts here. If he ends up dropping to, let's say, a 4.05 ERA, which is kind of around where Fangraphs is projecting he'll be this year, they're going to be in a really good spot. If he could have a sub-4 ERA, all of a sudden we're talking about 3 potential starters on the Boston Red Sox with a sub-4 ERA, potentially 4 with Walker Buehler as well. If 4 out of the 5 of your rotation is a sub-4 ERA, yeah, you have one of the best rotations in baseball, right? It's pretty simple math I'm doing on my part over here, right? I'm not exactly a huge math guy, but even I can put those pieces together. And if you're at a 4.05 or a 4.09 or whatever Fangraphs ended up projecting you, you're not far off from being that sub-4 pitcher. And again, you talk about what are going to be the difference makers in the 2025 season. What are the little things the Red Sox can do that can get themselves into this conversation? Bryan Bello is a big part of that. If he goes from a 4.09 to a 3.95, that's a full tenth of a run better than what he was projected to be, and that's going to put them in a really good place. And finally, in terms of solidified starters, we've got Lucas Giolito, because Kutter Crawford, it feels like more likely than not, is going to end up on the IL. And again, like Walker Buehler, you're talking about a flat-out wild card here. We have no idea what to expect from Lucas Giolito. Are we going to get the last couple of years of Giolito, which were very not great, right? I think that's a pretty decent way of putting that. Or are we going to get 2019 to 2021 Giolito, where he was one of the better pitchers in the sport? Again, like Buehler, that's a lot to ask of a guy who's coming back from injury, who has not thrown a pitch in Major League Baseball since 2023. I don't know what to expect from Giolito, if we're being honest here. The Fangraphs projections are pretty solid. I mean, it's a 4.43 ERA. If that's where Giolito ends up, I feel like the Red Sox are, again, going to be in a really good spot. If your number 5 pitcher is Lucas Giolito and he's giving you a mid-4s ERA, it's not going to be all-star appearances, it's not going to be MVP votes, but it's going to keep your rotation afloat, and I think that's a really good thing. Again, you talk about, okay, how can they get to that next step? With Giolito, it's figuring out what went wrong over the last couple of years he was on the mound and how he can get back to the dominance he had over the last few seasons. And the good news here is that Giolito seems to have an idea as to why that's going on. His slider was kind of getting loopy. It wasn't as tight as it once was. He's working on improving that. He's working on getting that fastball velocity back up to what it was when he was dominating. Those two things combined with the rest of his arsenal, I think, could put him in a good spot. Giolito, for them to be a top 1-ish rotation in the sport, I think just needs to be slightly better than what he's projected. Let's say he gets to a 4.2, and you're talking about, I think at this point, if all of this goes correctly, a top 2 or 3 rotation in the sport. Let's have a conversation about the depth, because this is where the Red Sox can truly separate themselves. The Braves, the Phillies, they've got depth for sure, but the Red Sox have some really interesting names. Kutter Crawford when he comes back, Richard Fitz, Quinn Priester, these are all guys who at some point are going to impact this rotation, right? Because at the end of the day, there are going to be injuries. You hope and pray that these injuries aren't long or season ending, but there are going to be parts of the season where guys are going to miss starts. The difference, in my opinion, between the Red Sox having, let's say, a top 10, a top 5, and a top 3 rotation in the sport is how well guys like Kutter, Quinn Priester, Richard Fitz, Hunter Dobbins, Cooper Criswell, how well can these guys step in and maintain this level of success? For the first time in a long time, I'm genuinely confident in what these guys can do. You're talking about 4 dudes who, in a lot of other places, probably end up as your number 5 starter in this rotation. I think they're underrating Fitz on these Fangraph projections. They don't even have Quinn Priester in these Fangraph projections, right? You add in those 2 guys and put them at what we saw last year, or even a little bit worse than what we saw last year, and you're talking about one of the deepest rotations in the sport. And to me, that's the biggest difference here. If these guys can be what they are projecting to be, or what we see they can be during this spring training and during last season, that's going to be what separates the Red Sox, the Phillies, and the Braves when it comes to what they end up looking like at the end of the season. Now, to be honest with you, I have no idea how the Red Sox beat the Dodgers. I think the only way the Red Sox beat the Dodgers out for the best rotation in baseball is if every single person in here has a career year, which for a couple of these guys would be saying a whole lot. But it's also not unrealistic that the Red Sox are up there competing with him, and I think that's the main point of this video, right? For years it was, okay, if everyone has a career year, they could be a solid rotation. Now it's not incredibly unrealistic that their base right now is number 4 in the country. Number 1 in the AL, but number 4 in the country in general. Just a little bit of tweakage here and there, a little bit of better performance than what they're being projected as, and we're talking about competing for one of the top rotation spots in the sport. And that's incredibly exciting, isn't it? When was the last time we genuinely sat here coming into a regular season saying this rotation is going to be one of the best in baseball and having a conversation about how they can be the best in baseball as opposed to how can these guys keep this team afloat and allow the offense to carry them to the postseason? All of a sudden, this rotation has become a strength instead of a hindrance to the Red Sox, and I think that's the biggest takeaway. So regardless of whether or not this team makes it to, hey, this is now a conversation of can they be the top rotation in baseball or not, I think we're in for a really fun season. So let me know in the comment section down below. What do you guys think? Is there a path for the Red Sox to be the best rotation in baseball? Even if they aren't, what are you expecting from this rotation this season? Is anyone out here coming in to surprise you guys, or is this sort of, these projections sort of what you're expecting from each one of them? Let me know all your thoughts in the comment section down below. As always, if you made it to the end of this video, do me a favor. Make sure you guys have hit that subscribe button if you haven't already. If you're new here, we talk Red Sox content almost every single day. Also, make sure you guys have hit the like button on this video as well. Helps these videos out a ton. It's the best way to let me know you're enjoying the content. Don't forget, if you guys want to listen instead of watch these episodes, the best way to do that is to head over to your favorite podcasting app and look up Red Seat Radio. Thank you all very much for clicking on this one, and I will see you tonight for the live stream, 7 p.m. Eastern, right here on YouTube and in the Red Seats.